On today's show, we have the wonderful, the marvelous, the awesome Mr. Ford Dyke, PhD. Now, Ford is known as the world's first AI powered performance coach. And if that's not enough to get you interested into listening more about the show, I don't know what else will. So, Mr. Ford Dyke, welcome to the show, bro.
Welcome to Simply Walk the Talk. Our bodies and minds adapt to what we do most of the time. If you want to change your body and mind, you must change what it is you do most of the time. This podcast explores all things health, wellness, fitness, lifestyle, and biohacking. Stay tuned as we explore various thoughts, methods, and experiences from a multitude of conversations between our interesting guests and experts through many fields of work. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Simply walk the talk. Simply walk the talk.
Josh, thanks so much, man. I'm stoked for this conversation.
Yeah, it's, one of the things that I wanted to discuss, and maybe we will dive deeper into this conversation, but it's the serendipitous nature in which we met, right? And, and I'll just say that, so for the listeners and the viewers, Ford and I met because we both were doing content for this amazing mental fitness application, platform, whatever you want to call it. And I happened to be doing some of the movement side of it, and I was recording some content. And then Lissy, the founder of Mindy, the company or the platform is called Mindy, and she was raving about this guy that's coming into town, and I'm like, who is this dude? First of all, he's got a really cool name, and you've got such a cool look. So if you are only listening, I would suggest you come in and look at this guy because he's a cool dude. I think we have a lot of synergy and just our vibe and how we get along. But then also, you're a beast in your field and what you do. And one of the things that I thought, like after I met you, I knew that we gelled quite quickly, and I thought, oh man, this guy would be perfect on the podcast. And then I got the opportunity to listen to you at the Mindy Future of Mental Fitness, I think it's called.
The live
That
event,
the live event. And I happened to come there just before traveling. And when I heard you speak, I was like, first of all, this is a guy who has definitely done a lot of speaking. You can tell that you know, you are someone that is very prepared. So I'm saying all of this to say, for you guys listening and watching, you're in for a treat because this guy knows his stuff. So let's start with your background, bro. Let's talk about how you got to where you are today, and why should people keep listening?
Well, thanks, Josh, for the intro, man. I appreciate it. It's heartfelt for sure. Some people tell me, like, I talk too much, like, hey, turn it down. You know what I mean? But it's like, hey, I get paid to speak, so it's not that bad of a gig. It really all starts, as far as the origin of this whole thing called life, it starts back in South Florida for me. Where I grew up specifically was on the beach of Jupiter Beach, Florida. And like didn't really have a shirt on most of the time, barely had shoes on. I was just kind of hanging and cruising out in that environment, not really understanding what it was doing to me physically or even cognitively, spiritually, emotionally, etc. I was a kid, and I was enjoying those environments. But as a kid, some people, they go through different life experiences, and my parents were divorced pretty early on. I was about 8 years old, and 8 years after that, my brother passed, and then several head injuries after that just changed the way I started to perceive the world. And it led me to study psychology at the undergraduate level. I was just trying to figure out what was going on above my own shoulders, let alone anyone else's. So it's kind of a selfish decision to study psychology. Fell in love with the field, Josh. I mean, it was incredible. But you realize quickly at the end of your undergraduate experience, at least for me, there was more to be desired. And I quickly realized that even though I studied the brain, it's attached to a body. We are human beings. So maybe I should go study the body. And I kind of mentioned that to a professor, and they said, well, you need to study kinesiology. I said, okay, whatever that means. Did my homework, went and studied exercise science. So at the master's level, I was focusing on what's going on below the shoulders, the body, essentially, sports science, exercise science, etc. And then I get to the end of the master's program and realize, okay, cool. I know a little bit about the brain. I know a little bit about the body, but those two things, they don't really exist in isolation. They're highly interdependent, highly connected. I better go get my PhD. I know it's not like the, you know, most simple choice, but it was a tough decision. I'm so grateful I went and did that because I started to understand the connections between mind body and body mind. And I studied psychophysiology. So it's essentially a fancy word for mind body mind connection. My focus was more or less in the performance optimization realm and more specifically within mindfulness and meditation. So, how do we utilize these techniques that I believe as a kid I was using on the beach, not knowing there was lexicon and vernacular associated with it? I thought it was just a way of life, but we have science to support what these techniques are utilized for. Finished PhD, jumped into professorship. All the while, I was training with Team USA for 7 years at the national team level in the sport of handball, which is a whole nother conversation. Traveling to 20, 30 countries in 7 years' time, as you know, definitely changes
Mhm.
the way you see the world. And now I am the performance coach for the wheelchair basketball team here on campus, as well as the founder and director of Mindfulness at Auburn, which is an evidence based approach to optimal performance, health, and well being. That's kind of the triangle along with professorship at Auburn. And I'm running my own platform, which is all about optimal performance, health, and wellness, getting people to really accelerate and to optimize themselves at the highest level. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, indeed, because I know there's so many branches on this tree that you just grew for us. Um, One of the things that I like about even just you presenting yourself today is the shirt that you have on, which is "Be Human,"
Mm,
and so I will just briefly mention for anybody that's wanting to find out more about what Ford does on a grand scale, go to his website, forddyke.com, and that's FORDDYKE.com. And I like to be human because for a long time I created this concept called be, just be. But
mm,
it was just the letters BE. And I I literally just started making t-shirts, and then I sold them, and people would always ask me, like when they would see me on the street or whatever, because I love creating conversation starters, because I have this
right.
analogy that is, or kind of a mantra, if you will, but anytime there's a question, there's an opportunity to educate. And
That's right.
so I I think that like we should just be. And so when I felt that and I understood that, I started to see that we could also be all these other things, and here you are with the shirt "Be Human," which is amazing. And I think we forget our connection to mind, body, body, mind, but also our
Mm.
connection to nature and how
Oh,
important that is, right?
yeah, it's crazy you bring that up, Josh, because my dissertation studied the effects of outdoor environments, specifically blue and green spaces, on our brain and how it changes our attentional regulation in conjunction with a moderator of mindfulness. So, like, that's definitely a wormhole that if you want to dive into, we can. But yeah, you're speaking
Wow.
nature. It's definitely part of the whole story,
It doesn't surprise me that
right?
you've been down that path. But it really is incredible. And there's a few things that you talked about, because I remember you mentioned some of the things you just mentioned now. You mentioned at the speaking event, so I kind of have the
Hmm.
luxury of being able to understand some of these things,
Right.
for the second time or third time. And so I was very fascinated with the fact that you went into psychology, because I also went into psychology. Crazy me though, I did a double major in physical therapy and psychology at the same time, on top of playing basketball at school and working two jobs, right?
Yeah.
Nuts,
Yep.
nuts.
Yep.
So clearly, I think we both had this same kind of pull in this, but we did it in a different path.
Hmm.
And I then eventually realized it was way too much of a workload for me in terms of a school workload. So I went to something that seemed to be much easier, which was communications.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, thankfully in today's world, it does work quite well because, being a content creator and things like that.
For
I
sure.
know that you aren't involved with social media that much or at all, really. So for those of you that are trying to find him on Instagram, you're not going to, except in maybe some of these posts that I put out after this. Um, but I do think that it's interesting that you went with the mind and then separately went to the body,
Mm,
and then now you're kind of, well, you are very much back into the ecosystem of it all,
yeah. Yep.
right?
Definitely.
Um, so let's talk about. I think it's fascinating that you are a performance coach for handball, or no, it was wheelchair basketball, right?
Wheelchair. I've done work with handball, but I'm currently working with wheelchair basketball as well as U.S. power soccer, and that's coming up here
What's
next
that?
week.
What's that?
So that's a can of worms, man. So for your listeners and your viewers, adaptive sports as a whole are different than able bodied sports. And you can just Google adaptive sports and it'll give you a list of them. So I just kind of want to paint a little picture for your listeners and viewers. On one side of the continuum, you have a sport like wheelchair basketball, where some of the athletes' disabilities can range from cerebral palsy, CP, spina bifida, it could be single leg amputation, bilateral amputation. There could be a whole list of disabilities that allow these athletes to play that sport. But sometimes, if you were, let's say, walking in an airport and a wheelchair basketball player went by, they don't necessarily have to be a wheelchair user. A single leg amputee could have a prosthetic, and if they're wearing joggers or jeans, you may not even realize that they're an amputee. Whereas US power soccer is on the other side of the continuum, highest level of disability. You're talking about a disease called Duchenne's. It's the most severe level of muscular dystrophy, such
Hmm.
that after each heartbeat, the muscle starts to get weaker and weaker and weaker. So lifespan of these individuals is quite low, and the level of intentionality that they have with their sport of US power soccer, which we'll get into in just a second, it's fascinating. I've been
Wow.
working with one of the athletes on the US power soccer team because he's our assistant coach here at Auburn University. So he was once a wheelchair basketball player, going back to this continuum. He was a manual wheelchair user where he was pushing his chair, and the wheelchair, for basketball is a little different. It's a performance chair, but you're able to push it. It's got the cambered rims and everything. But his disability renders him weaker and weaker every year, especially in his hands.
Hmm.
But he also plays power soccer. So power soccer is power wheelchair users. A power wheelchair has batteries, has motors, usually a joystick. You may see someone utilizing one of those in the airport. So it's much different. But power soccer is a specialized wheelchair that goes about 6 miles an hour. And the way I explain it is it looks like chess and go karts. Like that's essentially what's happening in this sport.
Wow.
People have to check it out online. It's awesome. US is top 3 team in the world. They came out of 2017, fell short underneath France. So we're heading to Australia for the Sydney World Cup to get back the World Cup from France, essentially. That's the goal. And to, be victorious. It's played on a basketball court. There's going to be 8 players on the roster, and there's a goalie plus court players. The ball is manipulated with the front guard of their chair, and everyone's utilizing a joystick. It's
So wait,
fast.
so it's
It's crazy.
8 people on the court,
8
like,
people total, not on the court though. So
okay,
our
so
team is our roster is 8, and you have your goalie plus 3. I think it's 4 aside. So 8 total on the
on
court,
the
but our
court.
team itself has 8. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I'm recently getting into soccer, or what they call football here
There you
in,
go. Yeah.
outside of
You're in London.
the
You got to be
US.
careful with saying soccer.
Exactly. I've, because I am so close with Roger Waters, which is the reason why I'm here now. Um, like for the last, I think it's like the last 3 or 4 years,
Mm.
he's such an Arsenal fan
Oh
that
yeah.
I can't help but like, watch the games with him,
You have
and
to.
I learn, right? And I've learned soccer or football, and I've learned rugby and
Oh yeah.
cricket,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Because that's what they love. So I'm imagining what it would be like now that I am into football. I'm imagining what power soccer or power football would be
Power
like.
football. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So I think what we'll do is maybe Gordon, he's really good at interjecting some of these videos and clips. So he'll probably
Yeah.
interject that while we're talking, which is amazing.
Cool. Very cool.
But for people that are listening, definitely go and check this out because it sounds fascinating. And
Hmm.
if you're into sports and if you're into sort of the future of sports, then I think you want to check this out, right?
Yeah, it's awesome.
So okay, so we've got I guess you call it power soccer,
Hmm.
wheelchair basketball. I've definitely seen some really cool clips with that online, which I'm a basketball player, so like that fascinates me to no
Yep.
end. And then you mentioned handball. I, I I follow a guy, he follows me back, who he's known as the handball ninja, and
Oh,
I've
Gary Hines, man. Come on. We
yeah
played together.
yeah
Yeah, former
okay.
teammate. He's out in Germany right now.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so I get a chance to see some pretty cool clips every once in a while if it comes up on my feed, and
Hmm.
I'm like, man, like I think I would have loved handball if I had gotten into it because it seems like a really fascinating sport.
It's crazy. It's like it's built for Americans. Americans typically don't realize that it's not the ball against the wall. It's essentially soccer or football with your hand. That's where the sport derived. It was football in Germany way, way, way back when. They were training outside and there's a lot of snow, a lot of ice. It's kind of dangerous. They brought everybody inside. They were still training using their feet and then they were getting injuries. So the coaches said, all right, let's just pick the ball up and we'll have our same formations. We'll just toss the ball around and toss it into the net. It was just for training. But then people started calling it handball, and it became over time a legit sport. Now it's at the Olympic level, and it's atomic in Europe. I mean, you go to countries like France,
Yeah,
Spain, Denmark. I mean, it's Germany. It's wild over there.
yeah, yeah. That's one of the things I love about being as well traveled as we both are,
Mm,
is that we get a chance to experience some of the things because growing up, and this is not a knock on America by any means, but my experience growing up was very much like, tunnel vision in
yeah,
that you don't really care about what's going on outside of the US unless you were fortunate enough to travel and go on vacation and things like that, or you just assume that everything you see on TV or in the movies is real deal, the
yeah.
reality. But
Careful.
it's like, right? It's like, wait a minute. There's handball, there's netball. Like I'm sure you've
Yeah,
seen
I've
netball.
seen
That's
that too.
when I see any clips about on netball, I'm
It's
thinking,
wild.
wait, why aren't they just blocking it? And why is there no backboard? And like, what's going on? Like, you have this mammoth person that is just standing there, and if you catch it in a certain area, they can't they can't do anything to you. So you just
Frozen.
got a
Yeah,
free shot.
yeah. It's crazy. Sports are
Anyway,
wild.
yeah. Okay, so let's divert back to a little bit more of this other things. So in the intro, I mentioned that you're the world's first AI powered coach. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Performance
Yeah,
coach.
so that came about with a platform called Vital, Vital. And a big shout out to David Gull. He's the founder and CEO of that platform. I was on a virtual event. It was a virtual speaking engagement. And he happened to go right before me. It was just the universe. We were in that order. And he presented his platform. And Josh, I was blown away. I had never seen anything like this before. And we'll get more into it so your listeners and viewers know what we're talking about. I immediately sent him a message and I said, "You're a genius and I would love to connect more in depth with you." And he said, "Okay, great." And then I jumped on virtual stage and I said it again. I said, "Hey, before I get started, I just want the whole event to realize how much of a genius this person is." And he was kind
Mm,
of chuckling, and he sent me a note on LinkedIn. And before I know it, he's asking me to be on the app and to be featured as one of the coaches. And I thought, wow, what an amazing opportunity. This sounds fantastic. So, to give you a little background on what this platform does, it leverages AI, which would be something like ChatGPT. It builds a script based on what you request that you need help with. So, if you open the user interface, it's on web platform as well as iOS. They're working for Android right now. It asks you a question of what can we help you with today? And here's the juice of it all, Josh. You can be as specific as possible. You could type something in. Let's say you have a show tonight, and you could say, help me maintain my focus and concentration, maybe reduce some low back pain from sitting all day on the planes, trains, and buses and automobiles, and let me soak in these moments. You can tap on my voice. You can do 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, all the way out to infinity. You can select your music or no music. And there's 8 options. You can do visualization, mindfulness, loving kindness, affirmations, breath work, concentration, body scan. There's a whole host of different options. When you tap generate, it's using live AI technology to formulate the script for you. And as soon as you wait about 3 to 5 seconds, now you have your own customized, personalized, specific session just for you live real time. You listen through that
Wow.
and you can go back and do it again. You can do it again. You can do it again. I did one for an animal. I said, send loving kindness to my dog Ella. And it was talking about her floppy ears and her fluffy tail. And I'm like, whoa, it's incredible. I did
In
one
your
for
voice?
I did it in my voice, but there's other options as well. You can select from different coaches. So we have, to say all that, we have a contract now with the wheelchair basketball team where we're piloting for our athletes and staff. There's about 15 or 20 licenses, and they're using it this season to try to get as much feedback as possible and see how it can leverage our performance within the season itself. So
Wow.
it's awesome. And I'm using it with private clients as well, because the thing for me, it's one thing to work with somebody one-on-one. It's also another thing to maybe have some group coaching situations, but let's say that's for 30 minutes or an hour tops, maybe 75, maybe 90 minutes. What about those other 23, 22 hours of the day where they're not necessarily connected with me directly, but they're able to access my voice, access this information and technology in their pocket? I mean, they just pull out their phone, type something in that they're going through. Sometimes I'll present them with suggested prompts based on what we had talked about that week. Press generate, 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, however long they want to do it. And I'm basically with them wherever they are in the world. And then we can come back and have that conversation later during our next session. I mean, it's unbelievable.
That's massive.
It's awesome. Yeah.
So is it a subscription-based model?
It is. It's $9.99 a month. And listen, I'm not here to try to sell anything. I'm a voice on the app. That's where it stands. But if people are interested, it's cheaper than Headspace and it's cheaper than Calm. And as a user of Calm for the last 4 years, it blows Calm out of the water because of how personalized and customized it is.
Yeah, for a second, I crazy me thought, wow, $1,000 a month, but you mean $10?
$9.99.
I was like, bro, they
just to be clear,
they better be doing a lot more than telling me some prompts,
right?
You know what I mean?
Ford's voice isn't that good. Come on now.
Right? Nah, I'm sure it would be worth it for it. No, that well, shout out to Vital, right? Vital.
Yeah,
Vital.com.
absolutely.
Is it Vital.com?
It is right now. I think they are joinvital.ai. But yeah, you can just search Vital AI. It's out there right now. It's so cool. Yeah. It's in the iOS store too, Apple store. It's really fascinating. I mean, it's really cool.
What is interesting about how you started that conversation is how you were giving mad respect to the guy who spoke before you, and that's almost literally what I did at the Mindy event with you.
Yeah, it kind of just happens. Yeah,
you know,
cool.
Because I was like, I was blown away by the fact. So there were 3 speakers, and Lissy she originally wanted me to come in on it as well to speak.
Cool.
But because there wasn't enough time, I think she had asked me like 10 days before it, and then there was a potential opportunity in which one of the speakers wasn't going to be there, but then she thought that I was leaving. I think everybody thought I was leaving, so I wasn't going to be able to come.
Yeah.
Long story short, it ended up working out. But what I remember, and I told you this because I like to be very authentic in what I'm feeling, and then I want to express that to people when I speak with them because I know how important that is. And so that's one of the first things I said to you. I was like, bro, your presentation was on point. I know that you prepared for it. The fact that I don't think you said one time.
I hope not.
and that blows my mind, man, because no matter how, even in this podcast setting, I have to be mindful of
Mm.
saying these, using these fillers.
Mm-hmm.
Not that, because this is my show, I can do whatever I want with it, right? I can say
Absolutely.
whatever I want, I can do what I want. But at the same time, I want people to take me seriously because I take what I do seriously, but I have a lot of fun with it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
And I think people come off much more experienced and intelligent when they speak the way that you speak, and when you're prepared the way you're prepared, right?
Mm.
Like, I know that before we started recording today, I mentioned to you, because I value people's time, and I was freaking out because it's asking me to update this app.
Right. Yeah.
Yet you
It's
were
like,
going
what's
through the
going
same
on?
thing,
I did
right?
the same thing. Yeah.
Right? But we both, we both get it. So there's
Yeah, for
no,
sure.
right? Like, we both value people's time, and that's why I want to bring the most amount of authenticity to this platform, on this podcast.
Mm.
And I just knew that you would be perfect for it.
Thank you.
And and so this is why you're here, right?
I
I'm basically
appreciate
saying
you.
this is why you're here. And I also just was thinking, like, just by the way you were talking, I knew that you hadn't spent much time in New York, because I know one of the
Ah,
funny stories was, I think
Central
the way,
Park.
yeah, you were talking about, like, Central Park, but then also you happened to come into the city right when there was the
Oh
UN
yeah.
conference. And
Wild.
I remember one of the girls was saying that you felt like you were being duped by getting a taxi because they took you way out of the way. And all of us who are New Yorkers were like, "Oh, no, no, it's UN week."
That's
It's like,
normal.
yeah, it's
Thanks for the
normal.
heads up, guys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is it
Meanwhile,
really
you
that
thinking,
bad? The
why are
worst
you
part
taking me
about
to
it
the
was the
Bronx?
stopping.
All right, so we just had a little bit of a, technical difficulty, and we're back. And so I think this is the perfect time for a movement moment, or moment of movement, as we call it sometimes. And so I know that Ford is probably the perfect person to do this, and I want to give this to you. So, what would you do in moments of being sedentary, whether it be physically or mentally? What is something you would do?
One thing I really love is the 60 seconds of space. It's something that I implore with the wheelchair basketball team. We start every session. We have Wisdom Wednesdays with myself, and we do workouts, obviously, with our strength coach. Athletic trainer has treatment. Coaching staff have their film. When we're on the road, we even take time before we eat a meal. They call it 60. It's short for 60 seconds of space. So we're just going to do that. And all that means, Josh, is push back a little bit from your table, get nice and comfortable. Obviously, if you are driving right now, don't close your eyes, because I'm going to have you close your eyes. So keep your eyes open, please. And you can still utilize this technique even with your eyes open. So find a comfortable position in your chair, close your eyes if you're able to do so. And for 60 seconds, we're simply going to do nothing. Let's take one purposeful inhale in through our nose and pause. And on the exhale, just releasing any tension in the body, wiggling some fingers and toes, rolling your neck back, just waking everything back up, and return to neutral position.
Boom.
60. Do
Awesome.
nothing for 60. It's not that
Do
you're doing
nothing.
nothing.
Right, right, exactly. The little immature kid in me thought, but we do breathe, right?
Right,
But of
yeah.
course,
Come on, man. I'm still thinking. My heart's still beating.
Right,
No,
right.
it's a great point you bring up, because I think a nice way to teach people very specific and refined practices is to start with the most foundational and fundamental. It's like you see MLB players in Major League Baseball, they take ground balls in off season. And you would think, come on, they're pros. They don't need to be doing that. But because that skill in that sport is so fundamental, free throw in basketball, like very simple skills, if they lose sight of that, then the other skill sets they try to acquire, it becomes more difficult. And I took that as a notion for mindfulness and meditation training. If we're unable to sit quietly in a relaxed position for 60 seconds, why are we attempting 5, 15, 20, 30-minute sessions? So I always come back to that 60. And I think it's a really great way to start your day, to end your day, even throughout your day. If something is, coming too high or too low, push back, pause, do nothing for 60 seconds.
That's the low hanging fruit, right? It's
Mhm.
like, it's because I agree with you. I think there's, in some situations, there's too much information in the world, right, for people to grasp onto. And there's, well, I'm a breathwork practitioner, or I'm a biohacker, or I'm a this or that. And I thought you're not supposed to hold for too long, or you're not supposed to do this. And it's like, just 60 seconds, right? Start
Just be
there.
human.
Yeah, just be human, right? Just
Yep.
be.
Yep.
And then see what comes up.
That's right.
Because I feel like when we can get back to this energetic being that is vibrating, at a cellular frequency,
Mhm.
like at the end of the day, we kind of have to get back to that, to realize that at the end of the day, everything is vibrating on a certain frequency
Absolutely.
together, right? And it's
Yep.
this universal aspect. And however you arrive to that is a good starting point. But it's like, we need to work to get there. And sometimes it takes a few things, but other times it takes nothing, right? No thing, right?
We're all energetic creatures, and energy is the fundamental component of how we survive, but also how we thrive. And if we lose sight of that, then why are we adding in other components that really just convolute the situation, right? It just
Right.
gets too convoluted, and then there becomes a bigger problem. You're just amplifying an already existing issue. So I think it's interesting to step back and do something as simple as possible and just take it one step at a time.
Yeah. A lot of times I think of it as, I think in some situations, people are looking for an excuse to
For sure.
not do something or to not
Yeah.
validate something.
Right.
And then I go, "Well, but like, what is the point of that?" Right? Because
Mhm.
ideally, all ships rise with the tide, right? Or however that saying goes. And so, and if you look at it from even like a team sports perspective or a
Mhm.
group setting, if each individual person, or look at it as a chain, right? Like a kinetic chain or a physical chain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We are as strong as our the weakest link, right?
That's right. So true.
And so if you look at yourself as a potential link in this chain called the universe, then you wouldn't want to be the weakest link, would you? You want to be the strongest link, because then that makes the whole chain stronger.
Mhm.
And so who cares if you can jump out of the gym, if you can't do basic arithmetic or you can't read, then how good of a human can you be
Yeah.
human, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna give your audience another one onto that chain. I love that chain analogy. The way I look at it is micro, meso, macro. Micro is the individual. It's the human. You, me, individual. Okay, now we take it to the next level. Meso. Meso is that group. So you're in the health
Mm,
and fitness world. I'm in that world. That's a group that we are in a community in a space. Okay, what about macro though? Macro is planet Earth. It's home. No matter what anyone tries to debate, that's home. We're not on
mm.
Mars yet, and if we are, have fun, people. I'll stay here. But regardless, there are 8 billion plus with a B, 8 billion humans. That's a lot of micro. That's a lot of mesos in different areas of the world, but that's a hell of a lot of macro. And I believe if we're able to optimize ourselves individually and share that with our 6 degrees of separation, you start to see the vision for it. Ultimately, you're helping this entire sphere that we
Yeah,
call home.
yeah. And that is the importance of building a community. And I for as long as I can recall in my field of work, whatever you want to label it as, I've always felt this pull for building community. It's just a huge part of what I do, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
love it. So something that I think where I'd like to go now, especially given that you just gave us this 60 and how cool that is, like what are some other things that you would maybe suggest people to look into or to try out when it comes to traveling? Because I know you're going to be traveling very soon. I'm traveling as we speak. I mean, not
Mm-hmm.
literally right now, but
You have
like
traveled.
I have recently traveled, and I will be recently, very soon we'll be traveling a lot. I'm going to be going
Yep.
on tour in South America.
Right.
And so I get this question a lot. So I would like to throw that question at you. Like, what are some things that you do to either mitigate the environmental effects, the EMFs, the whatever? What are some things that you like to suggest?
Well, number one is preparation. And that then we use that for the acronym of human. So be human is more than just a phrase or a tagline or to get some conversation started. It's part of my methodology, Josh. And human, HUMAN, breaks down into hydrate, unplug, move, aspire, and nourish. Those are the principles. Those are the elements of what makes us who we are as organisms. So number one, if you're traveling, prepare your hydration. Hydration is massive. And if you're listening to this or watching this, you're probably thinking, is this just for travel? No, this is for everything. But the question was travel. Hydrate. It's so critical that we stay hydrated before, during, and after, especially air travel, extended air travel. I'm heading to Australia. That's a 15-hour flight from LAX, which to LAX from Atlanta is 5 hours. So I'm doing 20 hours in the air. So my hydration has already started today. I don't leave until Saturday and Sunday.
Hmm.
So it's the intentionality of maintaining hydration, utilizing electrolytes, utilizing supplements. Big shout out to Thorne. I'm a huge proponent, user. It's with my clients, it's with my teams. Massive company, amazing company. Thorne, if you're interested, feel free to check them out. Unplug. How do we ensure that we're taking time to unplug from physical devices like cell phones and laptops and iPads or what have you, television screens, of course, the screen in front of you on the plane? Can you turn it off for several hours? Can you get your rest? Now, travel is tricky when it comes to rest because you're switching time zones. You're
Hmm.
not in the bed that you're used to. Your lighting is different. Your environment's shifted. Maybe you don't have the plants you're accustomed to or the family and friends and loved ones and animals. It's just a totally different environment. So the intentionality and preparation towards making sure you're able to unplug. I value my sleep, Josh, more than I value my hydration, but my hydration leads to good sleep. Hence HU. Now M, move. It's so funny to me that when we go through security, the first thing we as in general humans do is we sit our asses down as soon as we get to the gate, knowing that we're getting on a plane where we're literally going to be seated for an extended period of time. So I'm up, I'm moving, I'm stretching, I'm elongating my spine, I'm making sure I feel good with good range of motion and good mobility. Then when I get on that plane, I do what I need to do to still move as much as possible. When there's chances to get up and move, guess what? I take those chances to move. When I land and I get to hotel or wherever we're staying, that's the first thing I do is find a gym, go out on a walk, do a Pilates routine, stretch out, do something to get my body and my mind moving through space. A, aspire. Meditation, setting intentions for things, being as present as possible. What do you want to get out of this experience when you travel? Who do you want to meet? Do you want to enjoy it or are you just rushing through the process and clicking the boxes? That's the aspiration component. I'm not talking about goal setting, that's different. I'm talking about how do we set our intention for these moments. And
Mm.
lastly, I know this is kind of ironic. Most people think he hasn't talked about nutrition. Well, I save it for last because it's such a difficult thing when you're on the road. And you spoke to me about this when we were in New York together. It's one of the biggest challenges for a lot of people who follow specific diets. And remember, diet is really, if you break it down, it's just foods you habitually consume. That's all diet really means.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't necessarily always have to mean restriction and limitation and some specific name. It's foods you habitually consume. So if going back to the sleep example of unplug, we habitually utilize that area of rest, our bedroom. We're comfortable with that. Our mind knows what that's about. Same thing with food. We habitually recognize the nutrition that we're consuming on a daily standpoint. So when it comes to travel, be open to experience, see what they have to offer for you, but always prepare. Bring the snacks that you know your body responds to well, whether it's fruit or you have dried or you have dehydrated or you have bars or supplements or a combination of everything. Utilize that as your foundation. And that way, at the end of the day, you're able to still be human.
Bro, that's fantastic. I mean,
Thank you.
first of
I
all,
appreciate the
like,
question.
yeah, because I didn't even know that we would get to that. Because yeah, this is crazy. It's like I feel like this is definitely going to be a clip, that we put up, right? Because it's perfect. It's spelled out, I think, in a way that everyone can understand, should be able to understand. There's nothing controversial about it. It's just like, do what you can within your ability, right?
That's right. Yep.
And I love how you finished with nutrition because similar to what I do, most people know me as a fitness trainer, but in my book, I co-wrote a book called The Awareness Shift, and it
Mm-hmm.
documents the 5 pillars of optimal wellness, health and wellness. And the fact that I'm a fitness trainer, most people would probably think that you're going to get a book that shows a bunch of different workouts and things you can do to look better and feel better and
Right.
lose weight,
Yeah.
whatever.
That's
But
a small part of it.
it's a very, very small part. It's pillar number 5 at the very bottom, such that if you do everything above number 5, so
Mm-hmm.
1 through 4, then number 5 should be because you have the time, because you want to, or because you have time to. It's not you need to, and I think people put that first. And
Mm-hmm.
so it goes back to kind of what you talked about with nutrition, in that, like, where's the nutrition piece? Because this is what most people think about, like, uh, can I get a gluten-free meal on the plane, and can I, are we going to have a kosher meal or whatever, right?
Yep. Yep.
When the way I think about it is like, just like you saw at that event when we first met.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, I ordered a food because they asked me for my order, and what
Yep.
happened? So I had the most limitations out of everybody there,
Right.
and they actually ordered from a place based on my recommendation.
Right.
And then, of all people that didn't get the food, that didn't happen
It
to not get
switched it.
delivered,
Yeah.
it was me.
The irony.
And
Yeah.
and I felt so good in letting them all know it's totally fine.
I'm
Why?
packed. I'm
Because I
prepared.
was prepared,
That's right. In
right?
my mind, Josh, I was like, yo, he's a G. That's a shout out. This guy knows what he's doing. Seriously, though.
Yeah, because
100%.
not even from like just like, oh, I'm cool because I always pack my food. But what I took from that, the most important piece that I took from that is not making anybody feel less than, or making them feel inadequate because they didn't have something for me when they meant well, right?
Mm-hmm.
I heard them take the order. I know,
Yeah.
so they meant well. But to be able to go, no, it's all good. I'm happy to be
cool.
out here. Yeah, it's all good, right?
Yep. Yep.
So this is what preparation means in being the being human part.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can all sort of help each other grow
Mm-hmm.
by practicing some of these things you just pointed out. So thank you for sharing that. And if you're watching and listening, definitely write that down. If you need to rewind, go back, but like maybe we'll list that in the description. But I love that. Hydration, unplug, move, aspire, nutrition.
Bang. That's it. Mic drop.
Like, locked in, bro. I'm locked in.
I love it.
I locked in. And speaking of the hydration, I actually, just because, I think it's worth mentioning, I have a couple of things that I like to use, which is the Keynotes seawater packs. Are you
Mhm.
familiar with that?
I
Yeah.
am
So
familiar. Those are good.
they've got the what is it called? The isotonic and the hypertonic. So I like to use both of those. And I also like to use the LMNT.
Oh,
the salt packs,
love it.
bro, so good.
They're amazing.
They're so almost too good,
They
you know?
make you feel incredible. I've got
Yeah.
so many people on them. Our team's on them here at the university. My mom tried one. She was doing some yard work. She's like, son, I didn't get tired. She's down in South Florida, right, where it's hot.
Oh,
You know, she's working on a half-acre property, pushing lawnmowers, cutting bamboo, doing all this stuff. She said, I need some more of those salt packs. So she came and visited
yeah.
me recently. I gave her a box to say, here, mom, enjoy. You know, because it really is amazing
So good.
stuff. No sugar, no additives, just straight up salt, and you get electrolytes from it. And that's what our
Right.
body's partly comprised of. So
Of
shout out to
course.
Element.
Yeah, shout out to the LMNT. And what I love about the conversation around both of those that I just mentioned, it goes back to what I said earlier. Anytime there's a question, there's an opportunity to educate.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that most people ask me when they try that is like, wait, but there's salt in here? I'm like,
It's bad
good
for my
question.
heart.
Good
Yeah.
question.
Isn't
Because
salt bad for you? I'm like, ooh.
it's like, but you do realize that salt is a mineral, right?
Yeah.
It's a mineral.
Yeah.
And what do you think that our bodies need? We need vitamins, minerals, micronutrients, right? Which are
Mm-hmm.
minerals. And so, and then I always kind of go down this path of like, well, it's like refined salts. Yeah, we don't need a lot of refined salts and things like that, of course, but like this is what we want. In fact, the Quinton packs, what I love about that is that it's like the closest thing to our blood plasma,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
1 to
so,
1. Yeah, it
yeah,
matches up. Yep.
right. And so it's like if you really want to talk about hydration, like have you ever tried to give blood, or have you ever, been in a situation where you need to get a blood draw or something like that, and your blood is like kind of sticky and thick? It's
Yeah.
like you might need
Dehydration.
some more salt, right?
Right.
And I mean, obviously, you want to have it balanced out in a good ratio and things like that. But still, it's like we should be thinking about this sodium potassium ratio, right? The
Mm-hmm.
sodium potassium pump, and it's also kind of leads me down the path of talking about oxygen and carbon dioxide and that ratio and how that's
Right.
important in the body. So
Right.
our body has this balance, this balance that it likes to be in, right? You can call it circadian rhythm. You could call it the temperature effect or whatever, right? But our body's always looking for balance in some way, shape, or
Mm-hmm.
form. And so if the body's looking for it, but you don't give it what it needs, it's going to get it from somewhere.
That's right.
Or that check engine light comes on. And if you don't check the engine, it might not
Problems.
work much longer. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, I didn't know we would even get down that path, but I think that's important. Let me think of, there was an, by the way, but I am thinking right now. So this
Jordan,
is a
come on, man.
filler.
We got to get that out of here. No ums on Josh's show. The
He did.
police.
He did send me like every once in a while because Gordon and I started. Shout out to Gordon. He's like my Jamie to Joe Rogan, right?
Hey, there you
And
go.
and we started working together at the beginning of the year or the end of last year. And when we started working together, I met him on another podcast. So I
Cool.
was being interviewed on another podcast, and we started working together, and it's been amazing. He's done a really good job with this. And when we were, I don't know, we were probably 20 episodes in. There was a time that I'm sure it took him some patience to figure out how to tell me this, not knowing that like I love being candid. Like I think it's if we all have the same idea of growing and getting better, we should be real with each other,
For sure.
right? And I'm not the type of person to be like, "What you talking about? How do you speak?" No, that's not me. It's like, "Oh, note taken, thank you." But he sent me a very nice text message. Hey, brother. He said,
In the message.
Yeah, I think it was either a voice note or it was a text, but I seem to remember seeing the
There was a
word
numb.
yeah. So he's like, you might want to consider reducing the ums and the fillers because it makes it difficult with the editing. And
Ah,
I just think that it would help the situation if you could watch that. And I'm like, you're right.
got
You're
you.
very right. Got it. Thank
Got
you
you,
for
Gordon.
that. I want to make sure he knows that I can take feedback
Mm-hmm.
and go with it because that's what it's about. In fact, this is a good segue. There's have you read the book Netflix Rules of No Rules?
I think I've heard of it, Josh, but I haven't read that one. No. Phenomenal.
Phenomenal,
Net
phenomenal book.
Netflix and No Rules. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just called the Netflix No Rules or Rules of No Rules, something
The
like that.
origin story of Netflix and how it was all
Yeah,
started up.
yeah. Actually, I'm gonna find it because I want to make sure that I say it right because it's such a good book, especially for anybody who's running a company, anybody
Mm,
that is an entrepreneur. Um, um, it's one of those things that I think it will force you to understand why and how certain companies are run well. It's
right.
called No Rules Rules.
No
Netflix
rules,
and the
rules.
culture of reinvention. No Rules Rules.
No rules,
Netflix and the
rules.
culture of reinvention. Yeah, by Reed Hastings. And I listened to the audiobook, by the way.
Cool.
And it was, well, here's how crazy I am when it comes to reading, because I love to read. What I will do is I will get the audiobook and I will get the PDF version or the digital version of the book,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of go like side by
With it.
side.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I go
nice.
with it
That's
because
good
I like
stuff.
to. A lot of times I'm thinking about content.
Mm-hmm.
So thankfully you're not involved in that, right? Or you're not subject to that as much as I am. But I'm always thinking like, how can I make something into a bite-sized thing that goes into a piece on a video or on a screen or whatever?
Right. Yep.
And so when I hear that, like maybe I'm working out or maybe I'm doing something else and I'm listening to it and I'll go, oh, that was really good. So I'll go to the
Mm,
digital piece, I'll look it up, and then I'll highlight it, and then I'll screenshot it, and then I create, all
mm-hmm.
these little thought bubbles
That's
as we
cool.
go. But it's definitely a fascinating read, and I think you'll get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I'll check
Really,
it
really
out.
cool.
Another one is Shoe Dog, Phil Knight, the origin story of Nike.
Yes,
Awesome.
yes,
Awesome,
yes.
awesome. And
Didn't
of
they
course,
do a
Jobs, Steve
documentary?
Jobs. Yeah, they did Air, which is a little different. That was more of the Jordan brand, but
Okay.
Shoe Dog is the true origin of Nike with Phil Knight, the creator. Yeah, it's
Mm.
a phenomenal book.
I'll have to check that out because this is a good segue. You doing good on time?
I'm all good.
Okay. So I loved how in the very beginning you mentioned that you were shirtless most of the time and probably shoeless most of the time.
I don't have shoes on right now, Josh.
Very good.
Yep.
I am a huge proponent of all things bare feet.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, and especially in modern day society, I am a huge believer in minimal footwear.
Mm-hmm.
So I work with a company called Vivo Barefoot. I'm sure you're
Mm-hmm.
familiar with it.
Yep, absolutely.
You probably saw me with my Vivos on when I was
They were
there,
fresh.
right?
They were fresh. I think I even commented on them.
Yeah, you did. So this is interesting because some people would go, well, why would Josh read a book about Nike if he's such a huge proponent of Vivo Barefoot? But that's not how I think. That's not how I think. I think, how can I find out how and why certain brands got to where they are
There you go.
so that I can then use that to kind of elevate whatever it is I'm trying to elevate. And I think in the terms of abundance, not scarcity. So there's a
Mm,
abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. And so when I can hear something like that, what can I take out of it? Not, I'm not going to listen to that because it doesn't represent what I think. Because I
right.
don't know if it does. I don't know if it
Right.
does until I read it.
It's gonna blow your mind.
Yeah,
You
I'm on it.
should definitely, like you
I'm
mentioned the
on it.
Netflix book, this is very much so in the similar vein of how this company was created and the tribes and tribulations that Phil Knight went through. I mean, it's fascinating book. I mean, Steve
I'm with it.
Jobs, his book is another one. It's incredible. Just what these individuals go through as far as adversity is concerned and still maintain a super high level of success. You can totally pull some nuggets from there.
I'm on it. Mark my words, you will be seeing some content. Well, I may have to share some content with you.
Cool.
But yeah, I'm going to be on that. In fact, I'm going to write those down now.
Yeah,
So,
Shoe Dog. It's
shoe.
on the shelf. I'd
It,
let you borrow it, but there's so many pages that are messed up and torn and ripped and highlighted, and I've borrowed it to
oh,
probably,
good.
I don't even know, like 10 people minimum. And they hand it
Yeah.
back. They're like, "This is gold. Here, have it."
Well, I'll get if there's an audiobook, I'll get that
I'm
and
sure
the
there
digital
is.
copy. Now, while I'm writing this down, in my head, the
Hmm.
way that dog would be written is DAWG.
It's DOG, Shoe
Okay.
Dog, like a
Okay.
sneakerhead.
Okay.
Shoe,
Shoe Dog.
SHOE, dog, DOG.
And the
Yep.
other one, just Steve Jobs, right?
I think that one's just called Jobs or Steve Jobs. It's the Walter Isaacson, the individual who has written a lot of the biographies of individuals. So I think
Okay.
he just did Elon's biography that came out recently.
Very good.
Elon Musk.
I am on it. Okay, I got one more question before we start slowly wrapping this thing up,
Cool.
because I am fascinated with the fact that you're at Auburn and you're a professor and you are a performance coach. And we talked a little bit about wheelchair basketball and power soccer. Is that
Hmm.
right? Power
Yep.
soccer?
Power
Yeah.
soccer, power football,
And handball, right? So you've done all
handball. Yeah.
that. What are some other things besides the 60-second, the 60, right, is what you
Hmm.
call it, the 60?
Yeah.
What are
60.
some other
Yep.
things that you sort of like collectively suggest for your group of people that you work with, from a performance perspective?
I think it's key to emphasize hydration, movement, and nutrition. If you look at human HUMAN, you've got hydrate, unplug, move, aspire, nourish, like we talked about. If you were to focus on any of those, it's kind of a flipped script. Most people start with things that we can survive the longest without. Like they want to talk to me about their nutrition. I mean, Josh, it's not that I suggest people try this at home, but it's well documented that the human can survive about 2 weeks, if not longer, without any nutrition. So in my mind, it's like, why are we talking about that if we can survive without it? We know that someone's diet's probably quite poor. So we'll get to that. Let's start with something that we can't live without, and that's our respiration. I mean, in as little as 3 minutes, at the 4 minute mark, we have brain damage without our next inhalation. But even if you held your breath for 30 seconds, and I'll do this sometimes in my speaking engagements, I'll have the audience exhale everything and we hold for a minute. We barely get to 30 seconds. People are like, eyes are widening and they're kind of laughing. The point is proof of concept. If we're not able to live without our next breath, doesn't it make sense to start there? Shouldn't we optimize our respiration? So I work extensively with sport. Athletics is a huge component, but I've done work in military installations, some of our snipers, some of our medical surrogates, Navy SEALs, getting them to understand the value of respiration. It could be from a box standpoint to calm things down, could be from a triangular standpoint to enhance our energy, to bring our arousal levels up. 4-7-8. There's a ton of breathing techniques out there that you can play with. So the first 2 weeks, oftentimes month of work with someone is to get them to dial in their respiration.
Mm.
Then we start to talk about hydration. And all the while, we're using mindfulness principles as the through line of each of these elements. Because if you lose sight, if you lose awareness or intentionality of your hydration log, let's say I assign you a hydration log for 2 weeks and you miss 2 days. Well, let's talk about why you missed those 2 days. And let's talk about why you were able to achieve the other 12 or 10 days. Now you start to get a little bit more understanding of the whole picture, but you're still in one element. Then we move on to the next and on to the next and on to the next. So each step along the way, we're constantly coming back to respiration, mindfulness meditation, visualization, growth mindset versus fixed mindset, a lot of sports psychology driven principles based on my undergraduate and master's degree.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, that is huge. We are very aligned in that, because in a way that's the way, or the reason why I set up my 5 pillars in the way that I did. It's because, and you touched on a very, very good component, and I would put breathing in with the first one. But
Mm,
the way that I set it up is, what can we do the longest? So what should we spend the most amount of time on? That serves as level one, or pillar one. So the
hmm.
main pillar. The next one down is the thing that we should spend the next most amount of time on, and so on and so forth, which is why
Kind of
number
taper it.
5,
Yeah,
yeah, so it's like the inverted pyramid, so to speak. And
that's cool.
so I think awareness is the thing that we could do the longest, because we know that there's monks that spend all of their life be trying to search for awareness and
Yeah,
to get to enlightenment,
fascinating.
right?
Yep,
So
yep.
so we do have examples of that in our life. But then within awareness comes this idea of understanding that we actually have the power to make said changes. Because I kind of live my life and my career with this mantra of our bodies and minds adapt to what we do most of the time. If you want to change your body and mind, you must change what it is you do most of the time.
That's right.
And so that's why I built the pillars that way. Well, what are the things that we're doing most of the time? Well, we can sleep far longer than we should ever work out, right? I mean, that's just
Absolutely.
that's kind of one that people should easily grasp. We
Hmm.
should be spending more time sleeping than we should ever be actually working out or focusing on working out. And subsequently, we should be maybe focusing on our awareness more so than we should be focusing on how much we're going to move throughout the day.
That's right.
And so that's why it's built in that way. And I love that you were saying that breathing is the most important aspect, because it's true, right? Like I sort of pat myself on my back by saying I have a breath hold score of about 77
Whew.
seconds. And obviously I had to build up to that, but it's pretty cool. But
Hmm.
77 seconds isn't a long time, right? I mean,
Relatively speaking, yeah. There's divers
relatively
that go
speaking.
7 minutes
Right.
with
Right.
pressure.
Exactly. Exactly.
But still,
Yeah.
I'm still shouting out to your 77 seconds for sure, because it's
Oh,
all
no.
relative, right? Like you're not a
It's all
diver,
relative. Right.
but
No,
it's
no.
important to be able to utilize techniques like that because it's super advantageous for our health and wellness, but also for attentional regulation and self-regulation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you're kind of making me think like if I were to rewrite the book, where breath I mean, breath is in my book, but it's kind of throughout all of those pillars.
Hmm.
But I'm thinking, I'm kind of rethinking. I'm like, it might have to be a pillar on its own, because that is very important. What you bring up is very important. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and Josh, at Auburn, as separate from Be Human and my coaching outside of Auburn, I run the Mindfulness at Auburn initiative. And that initiative utilizes what I reference as the pillars of performance and health. And these are courses that I teach on campus, but also in speaking engagements, workshops, webinars, etc. Those 5 pillars start with respiration as pillar number 1. Then it goes to hydration, then nutrition, then movement, and then recovery. But so your audience understands they're probably wondering, well, why is HUMAN different than that? Be Human and my platform of Perfor Humans, where I'm reintegrating the human element into the word performance, hence Perfor Humans. That's really designed for the 1% of the 1%, high level performance, optimal performance, elite level. Whereas the work I'm doing at Auburn, it's more from a layman standpoint. How does an everyday person on the street benefit from these techniques? So it's separate, but it also leverages education, experience, expertise, etc., to be able to provide 2 different audiences, 2 different ideal customer profiles, essentially, or target audiences, the benefits of these types of practices, and they're able to digest it. They're able to absorb it. If you work with elite and you share with them kind of layman, they're going to be like, too simple. If you work with layman and you give them something too complex, they're going to be like, I don't get it. So that's kind of the purposeful, you know, line in the sand that I drew in order for people to understand the value of both of those worlds.
It's obvious that you have been working very diligently at what you do, because it's very brilliantly laid out. And I think my hope is that more people see your work and can go to your website and to check out what you're doing, because bro, you need to be on social media somehow, because I mean, this is
LinkedIn, that's it. LinkedIn. I'm a huge
LinkedIn. Yeah.
proponent. That's like
Yeah.
professional networking. I don't
Of
even think you
course.
can
Of
call it
course.
social media really, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
a
you
bandwidth thing, Josh. The reason I've stayed off of
get
it
it.
is because it's a bandwidth, and I think you know exactly what
Unplug.
I'm saying. Yeah.
Unplug. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it's
totally.
unplugged for sure. No, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it, because it's like, as good as you are in what you're doing, I can just imagine how many people are going to be scratching and clawing at getting more.
Mm,
And that's where we need to be mindful
right.
of how do we protect or shield our energy. It's very esoteric, but it is something that I learned in
It's
doing a
true.
journey. in that, I had all these tentacles within me, and the shaman had to help, through energy healing, help to pull those out
Mm,
and taught me how to protect my energy,
I
because
love it.
he felt that I do give a lot of my energy, but then what am I left with, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So anyway, I feel like that is a good segue into our last questions. Before we ask you, before I ask you the last questions, though, is there anything that we didn't get a chance to touch on, or is there anything? Because I do know that I would love to have you back on. Let's just
For
put it that
sure.
way,
Yeah, that
first of
sounds
all.
good.
But is there anything in today's discussion that you would like to talk about before I start to ask you these last questions?
I want to hit you with this because I really reflected on the name of your podcast after you mentioned it to me in New York. Simply Walk the Talk. And for I'd say the last 3 to 4 years from 19 through pandemic, during speaking engagements, people are coming up and asking me certain questions, and they want to know the evidence or they want to know the data behind things. And I reflected a lot on that during meditations and mindfulness sessions. And I realized, Josh, that it's one thing to present data, it's one thing to have research to support something. I mean, I'm a trained research scientist. I understand the value of that. But I also think it's really important for the individual you're working with to be able to walk the talk. And here I meet you and you have this podcast called Simply Walk the Talk. And parallel universe, I kid you not, during those time periods of reflecting on what people have said, I started to tell people that, like, hey, I don't practice what I preach. And they're like, oh, instead I preach what I practice. And once they realize what I'm saying, it's like all guards are down. They're ready for the conversation and they want to know
Mm,
exactly what I'm doing. So anything that I've shared today on the show, and I think you can say the same about your work, this is what I do. So you're essentially getting an extension, of course, of all the research, of all the education, of all the experience. But this is what I do on a daily basis. I wear my brand with proud because it's an extension of my mind and my body. I hydrate, I unplug, I move, I aspire, and I nourish. And with that, I'm able to be human. So I just want to thank you again for bringing me on the show.
absolutely. And you couldn't have said it any better, man. That was spot on and perfect. And I totally agree with you. It's one of the main reasons why I called the show that. And
For
I
sure.
added the word simply because it can be simple. It may not be easy, but it can
Bingo.
be simple, you
That's
know?
right. Yep.
So let me ask you this. What are two top pet peeves of yours? Because I'm sure we all have lots of pet peeves. What are two pet peeves that come to mind?
Number one is when you're leaving a restroom and you're not washing your hands in 2023. That's just easy. I'm just thinking to myself, you're going to the restroom, you're leaving the restroom, and you're heading into a fitness facility, and I watched you not wash your hands. But you're the same person that's going to yell at someone else for not wearing a mask during the pandemic? I don't know. That's a pet peeve, Josh.
I don't get it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't get it, man. I don't
Yeah.
get it.
Second
That's a
one,
good one.
I don't know. I don't know if it's like a pet peeve or not. I watched Ed Sheeran's Amazon Prime live the other night, and he's a phenomenal artist. I just think he's an amazing musician and producer and singer songwriter, etc. A pet peeve is, why are you going to a live show? And I'm sure you see this working with Pink Floyd. Why are you at a live show, but you're literally just standing there recording the entire show on your phone? What's the point of being at the live show? Pet peeve number two.
These first of all, these are both really good ones. So thank you for sharing that. And I wholeheartedly agree, especially on the second one. The
Yeah, it's
first one
like
for sure. I mean, both of them for sure.
that's
But the second
hygiene.
one, I see it night in and
Oh
night
yeah.
out.
Oh yeah.
And I remember there was a time. So when I first started working with Roger on the tour called Us and Them, which
Mm,
was a world tour, we did it, I think it was 2017, 2018. There was a point in which during his show, he, like, on the screen, on all the screens, the multiple screens,
right.
it
Yeah.
was making fun of people doing that, and people were still doing it. And it's like, wait, you don't see that? And
Awareness.
right?
Yeah.
So the lack of awareness for
Situational
sure.
awareness. That's right.
Bingo.
Yep.
Nunchi. I don't
Yep.
know if you're
There
familiar
you
with
go.
Nunchi, but yeah, Nunchi. Anyway, all right. On a more positive, lovely note, what is
Mm.
something you're most grateful for?
I'd circle back to what we said earlier with travel, the opportunity and the privilege I have to be a part of certain organizations and teams, to jump on a plane and to support them and to travel the world. And really, people see me as a subject matter expert because I have those three letters after my name. But I tell people all the time, it wasn't the education I received in classrooms or research laboratories or conferences. The most amount of education I've ever received is by way of travel.
Beautiful. And so, ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard me mention before on this show, Mr. Ford Dyke, PhD, does not have Instagram or anything like that. He does, however, have LinkedIn. So you can find him on LinkedIn. I just assume you put Ford Dyke.
Ford Dyke, yeah, I'm in there.
And you're in there. And then he does have his website, which is forddyke.com, like I mentioned earlier. I will ask Gordon to put everything in the show notes in the description, so you can follow all of that. And I wish you the best in everything that you do. Continue doing your thing, continue walking your talk, and safe travels. And let's be in touch, because I really do think people would love to hear from you again on the show, and I certainly would. So
that sounds great.
Yeah, thanks for your time. And to all the listeners and followers, thank you for your time. This is Josh signing out. Peace.
Simply walk the talk.
Walk the talk, talking facts. Move like me, but I move a little fast. Make my move, here to last. Fasten these seatbelts, I'm coming past. Take care of me, longevity. Hack my biology, better believe. Walking the talk, soul, mind, and body connected. Better come give us a listen.